And we're back. We're live. Yes, that test worked out okay. So it looked okay. It sounded okay. I got a request by someone to do some music, hence the guitar here, but we made on that. What I really wanted to do is report back from the symposium and continue what I was saying in part one of this report at the MTC report channel. I wanted to let you know that Catherine Feiner from The Guardian had some really great things to say. And I think I like the model that The Guardian has adopted. It's, of course, not the only model, and it's not maybe the optimum one yet. A lot of different media organizations are struggling with this idea of how to adopt a model for funding that will get people paid, you know, so that they can pay their bills and continue to do journalism. And this in the face of a lot of layoffs, mass layoffs across the country, in the United States, in major newspapers and other media outlets. So a lot of crowdsourcing for information now. And, you know, it's not a great time for journalists, and yet at the same time, it's the most important time for us to be here to speak out, I think, and that's very well in evidence at this symposium. And I really do have to give credit to the Knight Foundation for allowing this to happen, because it allowed people who normally may not have contributed or participated in a symposium like this to actually be here virtually and participate, which is really cool. There are people in situations who are journalists around the country in certain parts of the Southern Hemisphere, in Africa and other places, who are very worried about having a high profile. So, you know, we must all protect confidentiality. And so people are allowed to interact or not in these discussions and what's going on at the International Symposium on Online Journalism. By the way, Reporters Without Borders just released their newest 2021 World Press Freedom Index report on press freedom around the world. And as I'll just give you that as a teaser, and I won't tell you what the result is at the moment, but last year, the United States was ranked 48th in the world in terms of press freedom. So there you go. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily a place where everybody is doing great in terms of press freedom. The United States has a lot of problems, and it has to do with the corporate control of the media, not necessarily state-controlled media, although they kind of go hand in hand at times. But there's also a lot of secrecy in the government here, and lack of access to information about the workings of our own government. There's been a surveillance regime and secrecy regime for a while here. So those things make it difficult. We just, had a chief of state, basically. The president previously was very anti-press, and talked a lot about the press being the enemy of the people and all sorts of things. So we really have to avoid that kind of rhetoric, because press freedom is what part of what the United States was founded on in terms of the U.S. Constitution, at least. The Bill of Rights, First Amendment allows for freedom of the press, and that means that people need to be allowed to speak, and so we need to protect that right and protect the journalists who do that. The International Symposium on Online Journalism is taking place all week, so you can look forward maybe to a few more reports of these. Maybe I might do one every day after the symposium, and let folks know what's going on. And then, of course, these are archived at my YouTube channel, so you don't need to be here live to see these, which is great, because I know people have really busy schedules, and especially when it's an internet and an international conference, there are people from many different time zones participating, so it gets really complicated in terms of trying to coordinate and interact with people. I love the idea of archiving people's works. I really stress that with my artist friends and also my journalist friends. It's very important that you get the information out there and allow it to be available. By the way, a good place to do that is Internet Archive. That is a good place, so check it out. It does have some kind of sustaining longevity to it, I think, because it, although it is crowd funded, it's also supported by a lot of libraries and institutions that I'm going to hope will, keep that site alive and keep those archives going. And you can often find video and audio in multiple formats. A lot of also interesting public domain films and documentaries and films and things from the past. So very interesting place to go. Also a good place to archive your stuff, whether you're a journalist or not. And then, there are many other platforms that we're all using technologically. And that was another issue today that people were talking about. But before I get to that, cybersecurity, that was a major issue and one of the workshops today, one of the panels. And, you can see why, because in these days of internet hacking and, it's difficult. So one of the workshops was how to develop secure communication with sources. And so a lot of people, a lot of institutions like, the bigger ones, New York Times and others, use a sort of Dropbox system for whistleblowers and try to find ways of communicating with people securely. So that's a very important thing. And I'm not going to go into the details of it. You can actually, go on the ISOJ web channel, actually, on YouTube, and get those yourself and check that out. And if you are a journalist, highly recommend that you check out all of these videos, or as many of them as you can. This is a 5-day event, so things are happening all week long. And I know not everybody has that much time in their schedule for this kind of thing, but everything is being archived on YouTube. So, you can check it out. You don't have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific time or whatever to hear the keynote address. But these events have been starting in the morning and going on all day long, just like a normal symposium would. And then, for instance, today, there was the keynote session with Catherine Viner, editor-in-chief of The Guardian, which we talked about the contribution model that they've adopted at The Guardian, which has been highly successful, actually. Without a paywall, they have been able to garner support from people who just really appreciate progressive or independent media and want to contribute to what they're doing there. So that model has worked for them and has been highly successful. So it's very interesting hearing from Catherine about that. She's right in the middle of all of that and knows exactly what that's about. So we also heard from the editor-in-chief from the San Francisco Chronicle, Emilio Garcia Ruiz, and then a workshop on how to develop ways of dealing with mis and disinformation, which is, of course, a big issue these days, a larger and larger issue. I actually participated in a European Union conference on that, where there was a lot of discussion of misinformation and disinformation and how media can fact check and make sure that people are getting accurate information, because there's a lot of disinformation out there and people base their entire careers on creating mis and disinformation and propaganda. There's big money in it. A lot of, one of the discussions was about how people like to attract audiences that way by being controversial or conspiratorial and then building these sort of house of cards, but that are very alluring to people so that they continue to support them. It's a way of attracting an audience. I know a journalist who has done that, so I've seen it with my own eyes. Sometimes people will change their stripes politically and otherwise in order to adopt, a type of media that will attract a larger audience, whether it's real information or not. So one panel was a peer-reviewed research panel, which was about capturing journalism's evolution from algorithms to misinformation and how all of that works in the modern online media. Because, let's face it, everything is pretty much digital these days. As I predicted years ago, everything is kind of coming down to one platform, one format at least, and whether it's your handheld device or whatever you want to call it. We don't have the Dick Tracy watches so much. And video conferencing and teleconferencing is still now catching on after years and years of being used. I mean, it's been around forever, but for some reason, people have not adopted it in their daily lives as much as people had predicted in the past, with the whole Jetsons, video phone and stuff. And living in Seattle, where the Space Needle is located, I know all about the Jetsons, right? Because it's basically the Jetsons, the way they lived was just like living on the Space Needle. But that was part of the Century 21 thing that happened during the World's Fair here. And I'm getting a call in, but never mind. It predicted a future where people used a lot of video phones, and it did predict an information age where people used a lot of computers, and they usually had robots or computers fixing your dinner or something, which never really happened. But before we get off on that tangent, it was a series of sessions yesterday started with A.J. Sulzberger, who's the chairman and publisher of the New York Times. So also the president and CEO of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation was the chair of that morning session. So there was the workshop called Lessons from the Global South, How Innovation Has Helped Newsrooms Around the World, which I highly recommend people check out. There's not enough coverage of international news in the United States, as I said earlier in part 1 of this report. But there's so many innovative ideas and things that people are doing right on the ground to get news and information out there. It's amazing. So technology is a double-edged sword. You have people who are using it to try to propagandize you, and then you also have people who are actually breaking real information and news, which can be very effective in changing public policy and people's consciousness and opinions. There was a panel in midday about collaborative journalism networks. It was called The Lone Wolf Investigative Reporter Joins Regional and Global PACs. So how do people collaborate on their journalism projects? How do these networks form, and what are their uses, and are they effective? Is it a good idea? Safety in numbers. Also, people have access to information you may not, and it's always good to have a collaborative effort going on. There's more people, to pick up and run with the ball, so to speak, to use a sports metaphor. At the evening session, there on the first day, which was Monday, there was a panel on community management and audience engagement, which was about turning the news into a conversation with your community. And I think that's one of the most important things that have been brought up here at the symposium is I was in the chat room during that panel discussion saying, yes, let's talk more about this, because you really, as a journalist, need to engage in your community. I mean, a lot of reporters I know, and I'm not going to mention names, who just kind of sit in an ivory tower at their, big corporate newspaper or whatever, and don't really engage in the community much. They don't show up at city council meetings as a citizen or resident of the city. They don't pay attention to local news and talk to local business people and people living in the neighborhood. So I think that's really missing if you want to do authentic journalism. If you want to do corporate journalism and 30-second soundbite journalism, that's a different thing. But if you really want to, if you're in it for the long haul and you want to do in-depth journalism and understand the community that you're living in, then you need to engage in it, and you can't hide from it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist and just work for some corporation. You really need to be a part of your community to understand what's happening in people's daily lives. That's very important if you're a journalist, I think. And that, of course, is going to create some empathy, but it's a good kind of empathy because you will understand what people really need in your community and how they're suffering and how they're benefiting or not. And then you can help educate the public about that, and it might, bring about changes. In the old days when Walter Cronkite was working for a major newspaper, he said that the editor would just hit on a story every day, some issue that they felt wasn't being addressed in the community. They would write editorials every day and every day and every day and call out the politicians and try to bring them into the discussion. And finally, and they wouldn't stop until something changed. And that's activism journalism, advocacy journalism. There's nothing wrong with that. If the facts are true and, people need your help and they need the help of their political representatives and other people in their community, then you got to tell that story and get the news out there. That's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the workshop panelists. That was my message to them, basically, is that I think it's very important that people interact with other people in the community. These days, a lot of it is happening virtually, but There's also, there was a welcome party and happy hour after all of this on the first day, which is very interesting because we're living in an age of social networking platforms and engagement platforms and virtual platforms where people are actually having parties, so to speak, in a virtual environment. And that's what it has been. Shindig is one of the platforms, and I'm not sponsored by Shindig, and I'm not advertising for them or anything. That just happens to be the platform that the International Symposium on Online Journalism used for this gathering. And it was a welcome party, happy hour, and then encouraged people to BYOB at home. Have their own alcohol, a glass of wine, or whatever you want at home, and your food, and then just get on your webcam and talk to other people during these social engagement events. And one was a really great singer-songwriter artist from Austin, Jackie. She was really good. So I recommend that you thank you, Jackie and Austin, for that beautiful music. And I hope you get a chance to see this video so you can get that shout out from me, because you deserve it. I'm a musician, so I love what you did. It was so beautiful seeing you play that Epiphone, Les Paul. That was nice. Anyway, so that's the first 2 days. And my impression overall is that it's been very informative, very helpful. I think the discussions have been the most important thing, because all of this is cutting edge. So instead of having people shake their finger and lecture you like in journalism school about what you should or shouldn't do, of course, journalism ethics is always at the top of the list of topics we need to focus on. But I think discussion is what's important right now, in the fact that the new technologies are changing journalism, the different platforms are changing, people are approaching journalism differently, it's being funded differently. There's a whole new media revolution going on that people need to understand if you want to be a reporter, even at your local news TV or radio station. You really need to understand the technology that people are using these days and the platforms that people use to get that information out. So technology is really important. There's a challenge, of course, in keeping the technology from becoming the overriding influence on your life and, causing you not to have time to actually do investigative journalism or something. I mean, it's important that sometimes you just have a pencil and a piece of paper or something. I mean, I know that's very old school. But it's, there's certain things about journalism that I don't think technology can replace. For instance, the fact that, from my point of view, to be a good journalist, you have to be curious. You have to be intellectually curious, and try to want to understand things around you and what's going on in the world, and then convey that to other people, what you've learned. There is an educational aspect to all journalism, and we've, of course, recognized that more and more recently. There's a certain responsibility as well in terms of accuracy, because what you report affects other people's lives, and that is a professional responsibility that you must take very seriously and be very careful what you report. Always fact check, fact check, fact check, fact check. Okay, multiple times, not just once or twice, multiple times, and try not to let trying to break the news cause you to release information that may not be completely accurate. I mean, I know everybody wants that scoop. But accuracy is a responsibility to the community in general. So that's the first 2 days, and we've got day 3 coming up, and that's going to be interesting because you've got the co-founders of Punchbowl News are going to be speaking, and then Evan Smith, the CEO and co-founder of the Texas Tribune, is going to be speaking, because it is sponsored partly through the auspices of the University of Texas at Austin, which is a great town for music, by the way, which is why the music has been so amazing. I really appreciate that Austin artists have contributed to the soundtrack that they're playing for us, and the online performance last night was really great from Austin. It's a great great city for music, and as a musician, I have a lot of respect for that city. I wish, Seattle is a great music city too. New Orleans, Nashville. There's so many places. New York City, Chicago, so many great places. LA, where music is really important, and it's important to our culture. So there's going to be a keynote session tomorrow. It's called Reinventing Online Political Coverage, and then more informational uses of informational platforms, immersive journalism, VR and AR, and how they're adding new dimensions to storytelling. All sorts of stuff that I think is important, you know, for all journalists, but also for people who maybe have never even considered being a journalist. But in the next few days, there's going to be a few more keynote speakers and workshops, including one covering climate change. There's going to be the growth of opinion in online journalism is one of the topics for discussion. There's a panel on race and equity in the news, which is super important and at the top of everybody's list of subjects to focus on this year, and hopefully always. Reporting in service of communities, and with the URL uplift, respect, and love lens is what they're calling that. So there's another peer-reviewed research panel called Challenging the Status Quo, New Pathways to Understanding News Audiences Today. And then another happy hour party towards the end. So Marty Barron is the former executive editor for the Washington Post. He's been in on a lot of this. And as I said, we had the chairman and publisher of the New York Times, and Catherine Viner, the editor-in-chief of The Guardian. So some really interesting people who are giving their time, you know, to reach out to the journalism community at large. Some amazing people from all over the world. And if you go to the panel on collaborative journalism networks, you'll see that there's Colombia is represented there, Kenya, Lebanon, Italy. Very interesting international conversation going on here. And as I said, I think the conversation is the most important thing about what's happening here, is that we as journalists and editors and publishers need to talk to each other and need to understand what's going on in the world in terms of the technology, how it's changing things, and how people are using media differently these days, and how so much is becoming an online phenomenon. So I don't know if there's anything more I need to report from today's episode. I actually got out and, believe it or not, got a chance to get out on the water because it was a really beautiful day and row for a while, which was cool. But somebody called me and said, play some music, Mark. And I don't think the mic necessarily or the camera is set up to do this necessarily, but I'm going to try something here. Mr. Boss Man, we don't need any more wars. Mr. Boss Man, we don't need any more wars. I said we had too many already. Ain't going down that road no more. Mr. Boss Man, you ain't so strong. I said, Mr. Boss Man, yes, you ain't wrong. You had too many already. Ain't going on and on. Mr. Boss Man, won't you hear us when we call? Mr. Boss Man, won't you hear us when we call? Said, you ain't so big, you just talk, that's all. Ow. when we call. Mr. Boss Man, won't you hear us when we call? I said you ain't so big now, you just talk, that's all. Mr. Boss Man, won't you hear us when we call? Mr. Boss Man, won't you hear us when we call? I said now you ain't so big now, you just talk, that's all. So I had to play that because it was a request. I didn't get a chance to warm up, so but it's kind of bluesy, so that's okay. But yeah, I'm also a musician, so that's a whole other issue, is the arts and politics. But we can talk about that probably on another live stream. But right now, I'm going to probably do another report tomorrow about the International Symposium on Online Journalism and let you know what goes on there. It seems like it's a good thing happening, and there's a lot of people that are participating, and it has an international feel to it, so I'm appreciating that very much. And for the rest of you out there who haven't had a chance, you can check out all of those sessions online at YouTube at the ISOJ 2021 channel, and it'll give you as soon as the sessions are done, I think they're posting them. So a lot of these are Zoom conferences, and then they immediately post them to YouTube, so you can check it out right after it's done, and you can watch it on YouTube live, so you don't have to actually have a Zoom account or interact, in a video conference call if you don't want to. There are some of us who do. We're on the Zoom conferences with the panelists and things, but you don't have to do that. You can watch it anytime you want, and you don't have to interact with any kind of a video camera or anything like that, or microphone. So I want to thank you for joining this live stream. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield from Seattle for the MTC report, reporting on the International Symposium on Online Journalism. And feel free to subscribe and click the little thing down there. I think it's down there called it's a little icon that says MTC report. That'll subscribe you to this channel, and each time we release something like the segments that I do every week on the Jeff Santos show, talking about politics, music, culture, we post those immediately within a few days at least of the show. So we try to make those available. And as far as my music, you can hear me at SoundCloud. I have an account called Mark Taylor-Canfield 1 there, and that is where my latest music is posted. So you can check out the rock music and the classical music that I'm composing and all sorts of stuff there. I'm on Twitter, of course. As a journalist, we're all on Twitter, it seems like. And then also on Facebook and Instagram and then YouTube. So I hope you all are having a great day. And I look forward to another day. This is going to be 5 days of this symposium. So I hope everybody's getting a lot of sleep and eating, all of you out there at the symposium, and taking care of yourselves. And maybe I can provide a little music at the end of the day if you come back to this channel, and I can entertain you as you relax for the evening. So check it out tomorrow. I'll probably be back live around the same time, about 5 o'clock, I guess, p.m. Pacific time, to give a wrap-up of tomorrow's day's events. And until then, take care, everybody. Peace out. We'll see you tomorrow.